Welcome to Unbox Your World, the podcast where philosophy meets tech. In each episode, we're connecting the dots between philosophy, technology, society, science, and progressive thought. And together with brilliant minds across the world who dare to challenge the way we think and live in today's society, we are unboxing our minds one episode at a time. I am Maria Salting. I am a tech professional during the day and a philosopher at night. So let's get started. Let's unbox ourselves. Welcome back to Unbox Your World. What if companies would actually pay the true cost of their footprint? And anyone on the flip side could get paid for things that would benefit us all, such as planting trees and restoring the earth. What if we redesigned our economic system so that the true gains and the true costs are fully represented in the financial return? What if we could transition into a so-called impact economy? Alan Laubsch, today's guest, he is an internationally recognized risk management thought leader and impact investor. His mission is to protect life and to regenerate and restore Earth's economic system by growing an Earth-positive economy that includes nature in our global accounting systems. So in today's episode, you will learn what an impact economy could look like and the philosophy behind it. How currency would work in an impact economy, the role of blockchain in creating an impact economy, and if any such economies exist today. And lastly, what needs to happen for us to transition into an impact economy. So welcome back to the show. Let's get to it. So hello, welcome Alan Laubsch, founder of Generation Blue. Welcome to Unbox Your World.
Thank you, Maria. Good to be here.
So, we met at a conference recently, and I listened to one of your keynote talks, and you talked about how we can reinvent our financial systems and transition into an impact economy or regenerative economy, which you will talk about more soon. So just for the listeners first, what is a regenerative economy and what is the philosophy behind it?
Great. Thanks for that opening question. Yeah, to start with, a regenerative economy is very much like, nature works. It's sustainable. It's an economy in which the different participants act with each other with reciprocity, with cooperation, and it's an evolutionary system as well. Specifically, what my mission is to transform an extractive economy that values death into a regenerative economy that values life, so that the forests are not just worth their value in timber that can be sold, but where we value the ecosystem services at a very minimum that they provide, like the provision of carbon sequestration, oxygen, water cycles, and all the other things that are so vital for life. So I look at the economics aspect of it in a simple term that we've coined called Earth positive. Right? So what's an Earth positive economy? It's one that leaves Earth better, right? It's really based on principles that you can find throughout indigenous cultures, right? Think 7 generations ahead, tread carefully, and leave a handprint that's bigger than your footprint, right? So in our existing economy, we have these things called externalities, like pollution, the pollution of our water, air, soils, and those are not counted. They're not part of the economic system. They're absent. These externalities have become like a Death Star that are threatening the very planet, because the pollution is literally choking us. It's destroying our environment and making our planet inhabitable, not just for ourselves, but for the vast majority of the species that co-inhabit with us. So the question is, how do we shift from an extractive economy with these externalities to a regenerative one, where there are no externalities? There's no profit until all the costs are paid for. So that means the air or the water, or changing the water cycles, eroding the soil. All of those are damages. And the only kinds of ventures that will be successful and sustainable in the long run are really ones that are regenerative, that give back more than they take, that actually leave the earth better than they found it, that have not externalities that are negative, only externalities that are positive.
Yeah, and I think that's what really. I come from a business university, and that's what really appealed to me in your talk. How you explain that in a way that I think a lot of people can understand. That these externalities, we're not paying for the full cost, and how can we? So it really resonated with me, and I think it's a good way to communicate this more widely. So what do you do when you work on this on a day-to-day basis? What do you do?
So it might be worthwhile talking a little bit about how I got to where I am. I actually started in the traditional financial world as a risk manager on Wall Street, building models to quantify risk. It was a successful company. We spun off from the bank and actually ended up listing the company just during the beginning of the financial crisis. And I realized that, despite all the models that we have that estimate short-term visible risk, we're really not good at estimating the longer-term risks and the ones that are invisible on a day-to-day basis, like the carbon emissions that we've been releasing to the atmosphere, that are imperceptible on a day-to-day basis, but that are wreaking havoc, that we can see in the coming decades and certainly centuries. So how do we actually manage our risks better became the challenge for me collectively. Not just how do we manage it better as a bank or as a hedge fund looking at ourselves, but how do we manage collective planetary risks like climate, like biodiversity. And I worked for a while doing network analysis, which is very interesting because it's how ecosystems work. Networks, have a few different dimensions. They can be, there can be a level of efficiency in the network, but much more important is the resilience of a network, which is related to the diversity. And I realized that, we have a monoculture in money systems, in economic systems, in agricultural systems, and we've emphasized efficiency over resilience. And so now we're in a period of systemic collapse. We're seeing, we've seen the financial system collapse in 2008, which we still haven't recovered from. We've seen, food systems start to get severely affected. All these systems that are supporting our civilization are actually in decline or collapse. So the question really is, how do we create systems that are actually resilient, that work like nature, where they recover, they actually regenerate. They may not be super efficient. There's a lot of redundancy, but they work and they thrive and they're beautiful. And so I've always been inspired by nature. Interestingly, when I first learned about blockchain with Bitcoin, I thought, wow, here we have a system that's kind of like nature because it's decentralized, right? There's not a single, central coordinating function. There's there's no boss in a coral reef. You have peers that are operating the network. If 99% of the nodes go down, the whole system can reconstitute just the way that a single seed from a pine cone can repopulate an entire forest. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And then this concept of having an alternative currency like Bitcoin, with which you couldn't do anything in the beginning, but it was simply a reward that you got for basically helping the system operate through proof of work, and that made me think, gosh, it's so interesting to consider if we can have other kinds of currencies with purpose around regenerating nature, so that's what I do a lot. I research alternative currencies. I advise on various projects that are designing different currencies, DAOs, of course, decentralized autonomous organizations, which is really the best way to govern things. It's very much like a co-op, but digitized and decentralized on the blockchain, so much more resilient as well.
So would you say, for the listeners, a DAO is like a cooperative, but in the digital world?
Yeah, in the digital world, right?
Yeah.
So, it's an extraordinary way for us to harness the collective intelligence of an entire community, for us to include all the different stakeholders, for us to not be dominated by a single boss. Again, a single point of failure. It's really a community that carries something. So to me, that's really the future of governance. So I spend a lot of time advising projects that are Earth positive, that are healing the Earth in some way, while, as my friend says, healing us at the same way as well. So as we're healing the planet, we're healing ourselves. There's so much intelligence and creativity out there that is actually shaping how we are evolving as human beings on this planet.
So, in an impact economy or regenerative economy, how would a currency then work in practice? Because I also guess that in order to transition into a new type of currency, you would also maybe use the real money we have now before transitioning to it, right? So, yeah, how do you picture that? And how would it really work? Like, how do you put the value on planting a tree?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of pioneering work already on this, one idea, for example, I think Delton Chen was the first one who came up with a carbon coin managed by central banks, which rewards people for stewarding their land well, not just what they produce, not just what they extract from it. A great book to read is Ministry for the Future, which features that as one of the kind of breakthrough kind of solutions. So that's how one particular currency could work. For me, I've been pioneering crypto-based coins that are decentralized. What we designed in 2016 was a coin backed by mangrove restoration. So every mangrove planted at the Tor Heyerdahl Climate Park in Myanmar, would mint one mangrove token. We called it tree coin initially. And that tree coin is then backed by part of the ecosystem services that the mangrove provides. So this project is now receiving blue carbon credits, and half of the credits go to the local community and to the land stewards who are really taking care of this, and the other half go towards the financial investors. So in a way, we have a tree coin that represents the thriving, living mangrove tree, and the bountiful dividends it gets every single minute of the day. It's providing ecosystem services, whether it's producing oxygen or sequestering carbon. But what's backing this are these Vera carbon credits. So that's one example of how that works.
They are using that in practice right now.
So we minted almost 1 million coins. But they have other sources of funding as well. So this project, when we We stepped in when other funding sources dried out. They had planted already about 5 million trees. And so we sponsored another 1 million trees for the planting and allowed them to also pay for the Verra certification. And now the project has about 10 million trees, and they're selling the Verra credits to big corporations as well. So we were just a small part of the ecosystem, but we helped them bridge a very important time with that. So it was a funding solution. So one of the advantages of tokenization is really that it allows you to find ways to raise money for nature. And that's really what I want to do, is create a bank for nature. So now we have migrated this tree coin from Lykke, which was a Swiss exchange, which pioneered the first decentralized exchange back in 2015, into Mangrove.Earth. And we're just kind of setting up how the governance should work. We have a seed reward token and some community members. And, now we're figuring out, okay, how should we reward the seeds? What should we do with the carbon credits? Our mission is to help support other projects as well. So how do we reinvest some of these valuable carbon credits now into starting other projects? So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about.
Cool. So it's great that we have people like you inventing around these topics.
Yeah.
So a blockchain also obviously plays a part of realizing this regenerative economy system. But how? Like in explain for a 3-year-old.
Yeah, sure. So, blockchain allows you to keep track of information that doesn't rely on a central authority, right? A friend of mine has explained it in a cool way, saying that it's kind of like when you're playing football or soccer as kids, and everyone knows the score of the game, right? You don't need to have just the referee with everyone just knows, because everyone sees everything. It's totally transparent, right? So that's the value of blockchain. You don't have to, trust the accounting system of one centralized entity that can then change the accounting system. Once information is written to block, it's permanent. And it's distributed across the entire ecosystem. If anyone tampers with one of these blocks and tries to alter the information, say, "Oh, I planted actually 2 million mangroves, not 1 million," then basically that block will not fit with anything else, and we will know that that's not correct. So it creates a level of trust as well. And then probably most importantly, it can incentivize the kind of behavior that is Earth positive. So tokens can be rewarded for positive actions, right? Ultimately, this is what drives behavior. We like to think it's just about lecturing people about what the moral thing to do is. We've been doing that for decades, telling various companies they're bad for polluting and this and that, and they politely deflect from that, but still do the same thing. But once you set an incentive, like put a carbon tax or put a price on carbon or put a price on whatever pollution they might generate, then you see the change in behavior, right? So it really incentivizes behavior as well. And ultimately, what we want to do is have a system in which we reward the good players, right? And so that's where, new forms of money are super important. Things like complementary currencies have pioneered that way before blockchain. Powered with blockchain, complementary currencies can become a lot more powerful because it's super resilient. It's not controlled by a single entity, whereas a complementary currency could be issued by, it could be a corporation, it could be a foundation, but it has a physical presence and can be very easily shut down, right? So just ask the guys who set up a complementary currency in Thailand. Even though it was blessed by the king, within days of them announcing this community currency, literally the army showed up, right? And that's what they do. Typically, when any group of people set up a new currency, it's a threat to the existing world order. So it happened in Austria, when they set up their currency, immediately banned. Whereas the decentralization on the internet is really important because it makes it resilient. No single party can shut this thing down any more than you can shut down, an app that lives on the internet. and is open source and therefore totally decentralized. So that's another aspect of blockchain that's so important, is open source, right? That that information is there. Even if someone were to get somehow figure out how to shut down every single Bitcoin node and eliminate Bitcoin, pretty much impossible. But the code base could be used to create another such thing, right? So that's another really important part of this kind of technology, the open source nature of it, and the fact that it allows
that you can recreate it, that it's
you can recreate it,
like a DNA or
exactly,
okay,
and build
that's cool.
build on top of it, right? That this is like it's like DNA code. That can be used as it is, or that can be altered. So it's like a building block for others. And then finally, what's important is that it's open and permissionless, meaning anyone can participate into a blockchain, right? You can't you can't limit it by what nationality you are in, or what race or sex you are. It's just anyone can buy Bitcoin, anyone can mine Bitcoin, anyone can participate. So the openness of this allows anyone to join in a voluntary way, which I think is also very important, because any government solution, these are mandates that you're forced to adopt. Whereas if there are, whereas something like Bitcoin, Bitcoin has never been forced on anyone. You voluntarily join. You don't pay your taxes in Bitcoin, right? So this, so in my view, the whole world of blockchain and cryptocurrency is a very important force for empowering individuals to really create individuals that are sovereign and not reliant on only nation-based governance structures, which frankly are irrelevant for the big problems that we're solving, right? No nation-based governance system will address any global issues like climate change, like global biodiversity loss, and things like that. So blockchain enables us to come together as a planetary community across all the different kind of borders as well.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. Thank you. So my next question, which you've kind of already replied to, but was if we have any societies or communities today that already apply a regenerative economy. So you mentioned the mangrove trees, but are there any like bigger societies that use this today or try to use it?
Yeah, thankfully there are some real pioneers in that space that have done this for way before the internet even. We have in Switzerland we have the Wehr as a complementary currency. Bernard Leater would be really good to watch some of his YouTubes. Absolutely brilliant pioneer in the use of community currencies.
What was his name?
His name is Bernard Leater.
Bernard Leater.
Bernard Leater. Yes. And I can send a link for that later for anyone who wants to watch. He's published a few books on that as well. There's so many amazing examples, and the idea is that he was a designer of currencies with purpose, right? You'd have an example where a community needs to, for example, stimulate small to medium-sized enterprises, which actually, create the most jobs but have the most difficulty getting credit. So there's actually the country of Uruguay has implemented a currency which is backed by invoices from these small to medium-sized enterprises that can then also be converted back into the fiat. But basically, what money is credit. It's a credit system, right? And so they've created a new kind of money, new kind of credit system that can be backed by invoices of these SMEs, and that essentially allowed them to receive much better interest rate terms, because that currency is being circulated without interest payments. So there's a benefit to using that currency, and so that's been very, very effective even on a national scale. There's community currencies like the Brixton pound that have been very, very successful, where you can, I think the mayor even receives his or her salary in Brixton pounds. You can go to stores and get a discount, I think a 10% discount if you pay with that. And that it supports the local communities, right? So there's a lot of sort of alternative community currency work there. In terms of larger scale, kind of specifically around ecological currencies that are being designed, there are great projects like the Seed cryptocurrency, which has been sponsoring regenerative projects really around the world. Really wonderful team behind that, and very thoughtful design and architecture of that. They've done some great stuff in Costa Rica, for example, but also a number of other countries. So there are quite a few pioneering currencies that are actually being used in practice, and I think that will only grow. But I'll mention to you, a very simple example. They've found that in Africa, in some communities, they're using monopoly money. And that helps feed more people. It helps actually stimulate economic growth, because the lack there is that there's just not enough money. So even just having a token which represents, here's a credit, and you can use that within the system. That is enough to actually create create the kind of trust networks and reciprocity networks that you need for a thriving economy.
Do you mean like there's not enough money, as in not enough printed money, or?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Just right. So if you just have, it's an accounting system. It really is.
Okay.
It's this way. Everyone knows that. Okay, let's use the money in monopoly. Let's distribute it out in some way, and then. At least we have a way to, here's, I give you one for the soup, and then I can use, then whoever makes the soup can use that to buy the ingredients for the soup and things like that. So that has worked. And there are some projects in Africa that are actually using complementary currencies that are actually backed with an investment in the capability of a community. So they might, for example, put in a solar oven there, which then can have a bakery, and then create a system of money around that. So it's not just out of completely thin air, but there are many pioneering projects around the world working in this area of alternative and community kind of currencies.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it's a whole cool world to dive into. So what you said, it's great that it's happening at the small scale. What would need to happen in order for us to transition into a regenerative economy at a global scale?
Yeah.
The bullet question, right?
Yeah. So how do we really make this scale globally for the global problems, right? And we're all facing climate change, right? The atmosphere is completely connected. A ton of carbon that I emit here in Portugal, will affect the atmosphere just like a ton of carbon that you emit in Stockholm or in Myanmar. And by the same metric, of course, the mangrove that's planted in Myanmar that draws down a ton of carbon over 20 years is just as effective in terms of our climate as a forest in Switzerland, where more trees would have to do the same thing. So in order to scale, we need to look at the kind of global problems we want to address, that are challenges that our existing financial system doesn't address, like these externalities. And so that's a perfect example of designing a currency with purpose around this. So we can design climate currencies like a carbon coin, for example, from Ministry of the Future, from that sci-fi, that then actually acts as a reward mechanism and as an incentive to really reward those that are doing the right things. We ought to have a biodiversity coin to reward actions that promote biodiversity. You could have all the other kind of ecosystem services that are so vital to human beings around, let's say, the water cycle, food security, resilience, and so on. You might, go on and design currencies around the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals as well, right? So there are then ways in which you can design currencies with a purpose. And again, Bernard Lietaer would be amazing to kind of look at as a pioneer, who's exactly done things like that on kind of a local issue, on a local level. Like, how do we design a currency that helps regenerate a neighborhood with high unemployment, with a lot of social conflict, and a very, very ugly environment? How do we transform that into a harmonious environment with a lot of nature? And they were able to do that through a reward currency in that community. And I think we can do the same thing on a larger scale, and we have to do that on a larger scale. In terms of climate, one of the things that I talk about a lot is, we tend to have this tendency of pushing responsibility down to the individual. Okay, we all just need to, measure our carbon footprint and be responsible and, recycle and all this other stuff. But this is not something that can actually scale. We need to actually change the systems. Right now, every company, every municipality is drawing out their 2050 plans of how they will be carbon neutral. And do we change the lights to be more efficient, put up solar? Do we need... It's fine that they're doing all these things to get more efficient, but that's not going to get you certainly to be net positive. It'll allow you to chart a direction very slowly where you do less harm. But right now, there is one single thing that they could do in order to transform their entire entity to be regenerative, right? So if there's a carbon coin, with that carbon coin, you can actually then essentially pay for all of the historical emissions that you've made, as well as make sure that you have no net negative carbon emissions. If you had a biodiversity coin, you could then look at your impact on biodiversity and again get net positive or move into an earth positive direction. So what I see is that we have everyone that has kind of a balance sheet. I have some assets. One might be a car, for example, or a home, and I also have liabilities. And one of the liabilities we all share is carbon. We're all, we've all emitted carbon. Whether it's this T-shirt that I'm wearing, or the communications network and computers that we're using, everything, is using carbon. And so for me to mitigate my liabilities, I should have some carbon assets. So if as part of my asset portfolio, I have these natural assets, like a forest that's regenerative, that's drawing down carbon, that asset then balances my liabilities, right? And so that works up to company level, to government levels, where at each level we should look at what are our liabilities and balance those out so that we have assets that more than match the liabilities. Otherwise, we're essentially bankrupt, right? So I see a future in which in which we all start to have natural capital in our portfolio as assets to balance the liabilities. Things like carbon coins, things like biodiversity coins, water coins, resilience coins, things like that.
So then if you go and buy carbon coins to offset your carbon emissions, then that would go to someone else in the system that decided to plant trees, for example. So that will finance someone else in the system that will do something that's positive, and you kind of claim that tree to be yours. But or you could do it yourself, of course, as well, I guess.
So the way that the carbon credits and carbon coins work, and there's a number of them out there now. For example, KlimaDAO has their NCT, Nature Carbon Token, which is represents a ton of carbon that is mitigated or sequestered from the atmosphere. And so what I can do is I can look at my carbon footprint living in Portugal, not traveling so much right now. Average, I think, is probably somewhere around 10 tons a year, but I do travel a few times, so I might do a carbon calculation and find that I'm at 25 tons of carbon per year. And then I look at, for example, how many years I've lived and so on and so forth, and my whole family. I could come up with like a certain amount of carbon that I'd want to offset to pay for all of my carbon emissions. And let's say that I've calculated that, for my whole family, if I actually, buy 1,000 tons of carbon coins and then retire them, then I will have paid for all my past emissions. So I'm buying this carbon coin, and then I can retire that coin actually, and then mitigate the 1,000 tons of carbon. And what that's done is, first, by me buying the carbon coin, that has basically created greater demand, and therefore the price of carbon coins goes up. That means that I'm going to be incentivizing projects that are mitigating carbon. Whereas if I'm selling the coin, I'm pushing it down. And then when I'm retiring the carbon credit, actually, that carbon is gone, right? So it then as well increases the upward pressure on carbon, right? Just like, if there's 100,000 bottles of a particular vintage wine, and I've just bought 1,000 of these bottles and I've consumed them or retired them, now there's less.
That's
and people are going to see, oh wow, there's less of that specific wine.
I really appreciate it.
That's disappeared from supply.
And if you want to read up more about the guest,
and then of course
you can
incentivize
go to
the
show
winery
notes to get
produce
all
more
the links.
wine. And that's
and also,
kind of
if you like this episode, please don't forget to
more of these
subscribe
projects,
to the newsletter.
Because it's not
Never
enough
miss the latest episode.
for companies just to
Thank
pledge
you
to be
for
carbon
today.
neutral.
See you
You actually have to incentivize
episode.
investing in future projects, especially the afforestation projects, which can take, in the case of mangroves, 5 years before significant carbon credits are achieved. For slower growing trees, it could be 10, 15 years before these are mitigated, right? So we need a lot of upfront investment into those areas, into future carbon, and not just retire current carbon credits like like companies are doing.
Yeah, it's it feels quite tangible, actually, more tangible than it usually feels when talking about these kind of subjects. So that's good. So to wrap up then, so in a utopian world then, if we manage to do this transition, how will life in the regenerative economy look like?
That's a beautiful question. It's a really nice kind of exercise called backcasting to really put yourself into the future. And what does that future look like in 50 years or in 100 years? What I see, what I see is humanity in harmony with nature, right? That we're not an extractive force, but we're actually, helping all of life thrive. I see that we've played a role in protecting and regenerating vital ecosystems, that we are just immersed in the beauty of nature, nature-kissed, as a friend of mine said. I see a world that's green, that's colorful, that's blue, with clean water, clean air for us to breathe. Wonderful forests, diverse forests, lots of fields of flowers, prairies, pristine mountains. So I see kind of a world that was there before humans were there. But I see our presence as actually enhancing that, because we played a role in actually protecting and regenerating that. And hopefully brought back species that were on the verge of extinction back into thriving species. And we know we can do this. We've done this for a certain species of whales, for example, that we drove to the brink of extinction, but then we managed to protect as well. So I think that that if we in the future look at ourselves as regenerators and protectors of life, then we'll have remembered our most important mission, right? And the mission is protect life, right? That is the highest mission that any human being can actually realize. I see us having a lot of fun, right? I see us having tons of time to pursue our passions, because we have AI and robotics that can do all the menial stuff that we don't want to do anymore. They'll make sure the solar systems are working efficiently, and so on and so forth, and that whatever we decide to put our focus on will be a passion. So I see a lot of people pursuing the arts, music, writing, dancing, creating, doing extreme sports. I see a lot of social gatherings that are really, really fun, amazing, concerts and parties. I see us as explorers and adventurers, on this Earth, on other planets, of course, as well. I see this incredible unleashing of human potential, and most importantly, I see that everyone is taken care of, right? Like fundamentally, there's not going to be a class of people that doesn't have enough to sustain themselves. It's not a communist society where everyone is, the same, and there's no incentive for doing positive things. I think that there'll always be incentives, and there'll always be some people who are super successful financially, maybe, and others less so. But that's not going to hinder anyone being able to pursue what they really want to do. And so I see a world in which every human being actually receives a share of the most important dividends that there are in the world, which is part of the dividends of Mother Earth, right? So imagine that you had a coin which measured the health of ecosystems, let's say in the Amazon, and imagine that every Brazilian received a share of that. So when part of the rainforest is cut and burned down, these daily dividends that are a function of, let's say, the ecosystem services, the carbon it draws down, the oxygen it produces, and so on, suddenly you can see that this asset that's creating these dividends is starting to shrink and hurt. Mm-hmm. And whereas if someone is starting to regenerate, then that asset base is actually growing. And if we have a living income from the health of nature, basically provide this universal basic income that everyone is talking about as a very foundation, then we're not going to have any of the desperation that leads to the destruction of nature for so little gain. And to the contrary, we then have the incentives to actually protect and regenerate. I see a world in which those that are doing good are rewarded for it, right? So again, not communism, everyone getting the same, but like, hey, if you're planting, 1 million mangrove trees, that's, gosh, those should be the new millionaires, right? As opposed to the person who's cutting the 1 million mangrove trees, which is in the current, the current system. So creating in a way incentives that move us into an Earth positive direction. So in short, I see a world of regenerative abundance, and that one is inspired by Olivia Tyrone, who has a website called Rebundance, and a creative leadership class where she takes us through those kind of backcasting exercises as well. Yeah, super good question. And I think that, a future like that is possible. I think that we have everything that we need to be in order to get there. The way there, of course, is going to be, it's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of perseverance in this period that the existing systems collapse. And that's the key thing to recognize, is that sadly, the new cannot emerge without the old disappearing, right? So we're in a period in the coming decades where there will be a lot of chaos, and that's the period when we have to be resilient. We need to have sisu, as our Finnish friends have come up with, the art of courage, and invest in these totally resilient technologies like blockchain that empower individuals to shape the future. Because it's us who will make that future. We cannot rely on the existing power structures to do that, because they're going to be fighting for their survival, right?
Yeah.
That's how I see the future right now.
Thank you. That was a very nice way to end this episode. Thank you for that. Was who doesn't want to live in a regenerative economy now?
Thank you, Maria. Lovely to speak with you.
And you should also send through all the tips so the listeners can. I'll put them on the show notes so they can read more and listen more to it. But this has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. It's been super inspiring, and look forward to next time.
That's it for today. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you want to read up more about the guest, then you can go to the show notes to get all of the links. And also, if you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter to never miss the latest episode. Thank you for today. See you in the next episode.